Dan, so if we're done looking at the matches, I'd like to give you a list of certain wrestlers, and I'd like you to tell me whether you think they'll be on AEW television at any point in the near future, and whether you'd like
Hmm.
to see them there. Well, I'd like to start off with Jeff Hardy.
Um, from a in-ring, sort of enjoyment factor of seeing him wrestle, definitely, because I've always liked Jeff Hardy's stuff in ring, and if you can obviously reunite the Hardy Boys and everything, so that's fine. The only problem I would have is whether he, in his personal life is sort of secure enough and will be okay to compete on a stage like AEW, because like we've seen with Matt Hardy, a couple of years ago, like their safety protocol isn't the best, and somebody like Jeff, who can be a bit reckless, might suffer from that. So a bit of a yes and no for that one.
Cody Rhodes.
um, I mean, if it's gonna be this big, like, haha, I've swerved you. Did you really think I was gonna leave? Then that would definitely work from a storyline perspective. And Cody is too much of a talent for him not to be on a big stage. So yeah, I'd like to see him come back to AEW. Yeah.
What about Bray Wyatt?
Absolutely not in a million years. The guy should stick to directing horror movies and never be on my wrestling screen ever again.
Oh my goodness. Braun Strowman.
uh, I mean, sure, why not? There's still. I mean, one of the big criticisms of AEW in the early days was that everyone was too small. All petite wrestling, I think they became known as. And they've started to address that a little bit, but they probably still need some big guys in their main event to, to appeal to that section of audience that likes to see that. I mean, I'm not saying that's the be all and end all of wrestling, and everyone doesn't have to be huge 6-foot monsters, but you need to have a few of them in there. And particularly if you're going to elevate guys like Wardlow, then you kind of need somebody like Braun Strowman for him to feud against. So yeah, I wouldn't say no to that.
Makes sense. Cesaro.
There was a really interesting discussion on Jim Cornette's podcast about this, where because he's a big fan of Cesaro, and he knows him going back to the days when he was Antonio Castagnoli or whatever it was. So he was kind of making the point that if you're going to bring him back as Cesaro, basically as the character that he's been on WWE for so long, just with a different name, that wouldn't particularly work, because again, he's just going to be another guy that gets thrown into that mix of, ex-WWE guys that weren't appreciated, and now he's come over to AEW, and he probably will just get lost in the shuffle. But if they could figure out something else to do with him, give him a better gimmick, a better look, really sort of like build on the fact that he is like a very sort of intellectual guy who can speak multiple languages. That's a really good base for a good heel gimmick for me. And he's brilliant in the ring as well. So any excuse to watch him would be appreciated.
Someone who's got a history with AEW's biggest stars, Samoa Joe.
Only based on the fact that he deserves better than what he's had recently.
Yeah.
The best thing that WWE did with him really was that feud against Brock Lesnar, and there wasn't much else to really sort of take home from his WWE run, unless you're maybe counting some of his NXT stuff. So if they can bring him in for a couple of runs where he might get his hands on one of the championships, maybe even the World Championship, then yeah, okay. He wouldn't be top of my list of guys that I desperately want to see in AEW, but I think they could use him pretty well. And like you say, he has that sort of built-in history with some of the guys that are on there, so that would be fine as well.
And last but certainly not least, a free agent after the latest pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, Bill Goldberg.
Absolutely, the guy needs to come in and steamroll over Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and teach them what real wrestling is all about.
I second your opinion on that one.
I say real wrestling. I mean, I probably mean sports entertainment, really. But he needs to show everybody that, you know, a 3-minute squash match can be as compelling and interesting, if not more so, than a 45-minute technical classic.
Or a gymnastics exhibition.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, he's the perfect epitome of less is more when it comes to wrestling, and a lot of guys on AEW at the minute need to learn that lesson. So, yeah, get him over as soon as you can, Tony Khan.
I mean, we joke, but the thing is, like, you know, if you get him in through the door, I mean, he's going to bring, you know, several sets of eyeballs to the product. Like, I mean, obviously, he's not going to make as big of a difference in this day and age as CM Punk or somebody like that. Just because, you know, there's a bit of overlap between the WWE and the AEW audiences, and it's not like he's coming back the way he did in like 2015 or 2016 or whatever. But it would be a big deal if, you know, if he were to show up on TNT again and stuff.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how he's received, because I imagine that the vast majority of AEW fans would be, you know, sort of pretty sort of butthurt about the fact that there's this old guy who isn't a technical, an in-ring general or a technician or anything coming in, because obviously he would expect to be in a pretty prominent position and would probably be expected to fight for the title straight away. And I know that a lot of AEW fans would really not like that, so it could be a case of a bit of X-Pac heat that he would get if he came in, but I guess for the likes of us it would be pretty funny to watch.
Oh yeah, that'd be great comedy value. No question about it.
There's one name on there that you didn't mention, so I'm just going to throw this at you as well, and it's probably unlikely, but Shane McMahon to AEW, do you see anything in that?
Yes, please, I'd love to see Shane McMahon in AEW. The thing is, I mean, Dan, like, the wrestling fans still have like a reverence for Shane McMahon that I don't get. Like, they'd pop for him. I think he'd get a great reception if he turned up in AEW.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would certainly like to see it. I mean, it would be a huge moment. It would definitely be a bit of a callback to the infamous, you know, WCW acquisition type thing. But I get it. I suppose it's very typical of a Shane McMahon type affair, because it would be initially a really big, you know, pop and surprise, and there'd be some goodwill directed at him, but then give it a couple of weeks and everybody would just be for him again. He just, yeah, it doesn't really matter what he does. He keeps coming back, and it's, you know, it's got to be admired as, you know, on a certain level.
Perhaps you could get Sting, Goldberg, and Shane McMahon versus Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks.
Or maybe, I don't know, the Tony Khan and Shane McMahon feud.
Oh yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Let's see what Tony Khan's made of.
I mean, they'd probably have like a cocaine snorting contest as opposed to a wrestling match.
I wasn't going to go there, but, you know, yeah, fair enough. A bag of cocaine on a pole match.